basically still a novice monk and he was going through this inner turmoil, he met an old master. I'm not sure if this was in China. This was probably in China at the time. And basically he stayed over there. And then the master asked him, what bothers you? And then he started talking to the master, what bothers you? And then the master said, what other problem do you have? And then he said, this bothers me. And he just kept asking him, what else? And then at some point he already didn't know what to say. Like he emptied all of his doubts to the master. And then in one moment the master just slammed the table and he said, who is asking these questions? And he basically felt like this enormous burden just suddenly left, and he experienced this state of no self right there. Like the master basically enlightened him, induced this experience in him. But the situation that brought him to this experience, you can imagine, he was already in a state of some kind of absorption. He was already in a state of very deep absorption. And we can see that the people who actually had some kind of spiritual experiences, they definitely go through some kind of deep period of inner absorption, whether it's depression or some kind of inner states. So during the meditation, this absorption is also in some way induced. So of course it's different than depression, but there is some kind of pattern here that I guess our consciousness is going through before something breaks. And then there is this transcendental experience. And interesting thing about studying these states is that modern psychology would say, oh, you're going through a psychosis. You're having this personality dissolution, you're going through a very bad state, you're going crazy. Let me give you antidepressants so it will focus you. And in fact, in our everyday life, because you have to work and you have kids and people get suicidal and depressed, it can be, maybe that's the best solution. So I'm not saying that's a wrong way to go, but if we had deeper knowledge as a society of these states and what our mind goes through, maybe we could create big support groups and have and use this as a way to actually go to a place where we will end up in a much better position than we were before, right? So afterwards, so basically, I have these two chapters. The first chapter is non-pharmacologically induced states. So the first one is the traditional Zen meditation, and the second one is recently developed holotropic breathwork. So what is holotropic breathwork? Holotropic breathwork is a healing modality that was developed by Stanislav Grof and his wife Christina Grof. And before that, they were working with pharmacological ways to induce these states, especially Grof. But after LSD, after these kind of ways became illegal, he continued his work by using other means. Basically, rapid breathing was one of the ways, strong music, drumming, and body work. So you combine everything and basically you realize that you can induce in people states of consciousness which are pretty much similar to what he saw being induced by LSD. It can be very powerful and it can be very intense, and it can help people also go through very deep state places and engage the holotropic mind. So this is what Zen meditation would do, right? It engages the movement towards wholeness. From scattered mind, you go to one mind. You experience this oneness with all different parts of yourself, and even beyond with your body and then with your environment. And then you kind of transcend even that feeling of oneness. Holotropic breathwork engages all these aspects to induce very powerful states of consciousness, but for the purpose of basically healing. It has a clinical purpose. The founder was a psychiatrist, and it has this kind of purpose to allow people to engage this part of their mind. It's almost as if our minds want to heal, but us living every day in a certain pattern block the holotropic process to start. It just blocks this process from starting. And ways to start can be many. One of them is meditation, the other way is breathing. In meditation, you actually observe your breathing. That's the basics in meditation. You count your breath, you observe your breath, you count your breath. And here you just start doing circular breathing, which means you breathe without any breaks. So you lie down there and you breathe without any breaks. So, without any breaks. So what he says, according to him...
Did you try?
Yes, I've tried. Yeah, I have experience with rebirthing and with holotropic breath work. It's powerful. It's very powerful. Yeah, it's very powerful. What he says that happens during the holotropic breath work is that, I mean, we still haven't. It's so strange that like we have so little research on this state. There's so little neuroscientific research on this state. Even the meditation, when it gets researched, like it has been criticized. A lot of the neuroscience of meditation, this new emerging branch of neuroscience, is very limited because people who do the research have very little knowledge of the actual context and the background that the meditation comes from. So they just put everything together. And they do MRI of a person who does Tai Chi Chuan, Zen meditation, Buddhist meditation, and they put them all together and they say, from meditation we have discovered this, and this. But it's by doing all these different practices, they might just engage very different parts of the brain and talk about different things. So that will taint the
Sorry, I cut you. It's very interesting because you use the word meditation, but as you are explaining, there are hundreds of different meditation styles. And we always say meditation is good for us.
Yes.
Do you do meditation? But
It's
it's like martial arts. It's
Yeah.
just so many completely different.
Yes. Yes, there are many different practices, and different practices probably use different states. They are meant to use different states. Although it's very interesting that maybe actually a lot of them do move person to this state of one mind, and maybe. But first, we have to research one type of meditation practice, and then sustainably in a sustained manner, and different type of meditation practice in a sustained manner. And also, people who do all these meditation practices are on different level of their practice. So in fact, this is a whole, to study this is really not an easy task. And right now, neuroscience is not on up there, but it's slowly building up there. It's slowly going there, but it's not there. It's not there yet.
That's also, it's interesting because meditation is a word that encompass so many different styles.
Yes.
But finally, the same with the goal. We always talk about enlightenment. What does it mean?
Yes. Yes.
You know, what does it mean for you? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for somebody else?
Yes. Yes.
You know,
Like the
enlightenment
Western,
that can mean anything.
Yes. Yes. The Western concept of enlightenment is intellectual liberation. It's very different from the Eastern concept, which is this ontological liberation from the cycle of birth and death. Like reaching to a place of consciousness which is like transcendent in some way. So it's very different, right? And even in the Hinduism and Buddhism, it's very different what they mean by enlightenment, but maybe not. So it's yeah, it's a whole jungle out there when we talk about these states. But what are the physiological mechanisms that happen when you start doing this rapid breathing? What happens to the brain? So we don't really know exactly, but this is what Grof speculates about. And it might be similar to what happens to the brain when people ingest mind-altering substances, actually. Like psilocybin or ayahuasca. It might be something similar. So this is what happens, probably. The rapid breathing increases the rate of oxygen in the blood and decreases the carbon dioxide. So you get to have hyperventilation. So when people do rapid breathing, they might start experiencing cramps in their leg, in their arms, like there might be some kind of some kind of physical phenomenon, which might be a little bit scary, and if a doctor sees you, they might shoot you with calcium or something to balance the alkalinity in your blood. What happens though is that if you continue to breathe, that will go away. And modern medicine doesn't realize that. If they see that happening, they will get freaked out. They don't know that if you continue with the rapid breathing, it will go away. So basically, you start doing the rapid breathing. So this increases the alkalinity of the blood, which in turn activates a homeostatic mechanism that tries to balance the pH of the blood. Immediately, your body will try to balance the pH.
Just one question.
Yes.
Because I think now I remember why I had actually thought about. You mentioned ayahuasca. No? Yeah, it's actually the plant, and it's a mescaline plant, right? That's why I had known it. It's just one of these plants that has mescaline in it. That's the ayahuasca plant.
It doesn't have mescaline; it has DMT. DMT, dimethyltryptamine. That's the
I thought it was just one of the like the other mescaline plants that are also used in Ecuador by the were used by the indigenous
Right. Yeah, they're different plants, but I'm not sure what is the mind-altering ingredient in mescaline itself. I'm not really sure what is it. In ayahuasca particularly, it's DMT, dimethyltryptamine. So when this homeostatic mechanism activates, the cerebral cortex, it's being the youngest part of the brain from an evolutionary perspective. That's like the most superficial part of the brain. And it's possible that during the rapid breathing process, some cortical functions during this process, when your blood has too much oxygen, decreases the carbon dioxide, and then it acts in order for your body to balance, there will be decrease of the younger parts of the brain, and then there will be this inhibition, and at the same time, the activity in some more archaic parts of the brain will increase. So this is what might happen. And when that happens, these older parts of the brain take over, like people might experience what was suppressed will come out. And people will start processing that almost as if our brain in its evolution has had to make some compromises. It had to suppress some parts in order to have a focused, narrowed, egoic sense of self. So in order to have this sense of self, it had to suppress other parts of the brain. So what we have in everyday, ordinary state of consciousness is actually, in a way, foreign to the deeper parts of our brain. So parts of our brain actively inhibits, suppresses parts of our brain in order to have this rational waking state.
To be able to live a normal life.
Yes, and this is why sleep is very important, because when we sleep in the REM sleep, this network disentangles, and then we have deeper access, like what basically was suppressed in the daily part, like suddenly floods in the consciousness, and we have this reset. So especially for modern people, sleep is extremely important. And it's very interesting why meditation practitioners, extremely experienced meditation practitioners, they have, what happens is, we talk about here even about people who do prayers in the Byzantine Catholic tradition, the fathers of prayer, this need for sleep decreases. As they process more and more subconscious material, the need for sleep slowly decreases. So that's very interesting.
One more thing to just came to my mind.
Yeah.
People that have had depressions and have had very deep depressions, they tried everything, including electroshock therapy. What seems to have helped in many ways is that they quit these people of their sleep for quite a time. I mean, they made them sleep less, up to the 2 hours per night during a lot of time, and this helped against depression. It's actually fascinating because it kind of dissolve their self, and so maybe the self would not turn around itself anymore and around the suicidal thoughts. But when I read it, it was quite fascinating that just by depriving people of their sleep, you could actually cure depression.
Wow.
I've never tried it, I've not been to the state of depression.
Sleep deprivation is one of the ways to induce altered states, definitely.
It's
It
also
exists
a
as a
torture.
practice. It exists as a...
It's interesting because if you read a book like called Seth, S-E-T-H, it's a spirit who will go, it's a channeling spirit, where a spirit go into the body of a lady, James Roberts, and he explained that if people sleep less, we shall actually not sleep so much, we shall sleep less, because if we sleep only around 4 to 5 hours per night, our conscious mind would be much more connected to our subconscious mind. And if you sleep too much, it's actually disconnecting you from your subconscious mind. It's probably since you have less sleep, these people who are in depression enter an unknown ordinary conscious state, and they probably start to process feelings that were putting them into depression.
Yeah, and it's very interesting, like people who have schizophrenia, they have very disrupted REM patterns. So when they have disrupted REM patterns, like with schizophrenia, they start hearing voices, it's almost as if this mechanism of representing otherness starts switching. So they think that the thoughts they have, they don't belong to them. They think the thoughts they have belong to somebody else. It's like they, basically in our everyday experience, we attribute our mind in our secondary consciousness and in our waking consciousness, attributes, basically constantly separates what belongs to me and what belongs to another. Like this belongs to me, this hand belongs to me. Like the mind represents, like the mind has an inner representation of the body. The mind has an inner representation of the self and whatever that means. And then by that also has an inner representation of otherness. Like what is not self is other. And then the mind has this process of constantly like shifting between this. But with people with schizophrenia, they might start this process of attributing otherness and self. It kind of switches off. It changes. And basically they might attribute otherness to thoughts they have. And in many cultures they would say, oh, it's possession, because it might happen. But let's go to the even more interesting part. Let's talk about Stanislav Grof's experience. We'll talk about,
maybe 1 or 2 minutes and
5 minutes, but let's try to keep any other questions to the end.
questions.
we have 5 minutes?
Well, it's up to you. It's up to you. But
6.
Then we're gonna
30
jump
minutes.
off like a really interesting part of my speech.
Okay, you've got 10 minutes.
But then there won't be enough time for
Okay,
questions.
okay, 10 more minutes. Well, Grof, like Stanislav Grof, is a very famous person in this field of non-ordinary states of consciousness. He came with the term holotropic mind, the mind that moves towards wholeness, right? And basically his research, he was born in Czechoslovakia. Communist country, got like psychiatrist training, and when they started using LSD, they would send them LSD from Switzerland. And like psychiatrists were very curious about this substance because it was very powerful and could induce very interesting psychotic states, and psychiatrists would think like, if we take it, we can actually understand where our patients are coming from. So actually they would take it themselves. And he had a very strong mind-altering experience there, and he was like, everything like when he had his experience, nothing in his training, which was very Freudian classical psychoanalysis, would prepare him for that. And then basically only in Czechoslovakia, in Prague, the basic study included 52 psychiatric patients. All major clinical categories were included, like we're talking schizophrenia, depression, psychosis, all kinds of states, addictions. And also after that he moved to the States in the research unit of Spring Grove State in Baltimore, where he additionally worked on another 800 cases together with his colleagues. 800 cases. So altogether we're talking about thousands of sessions that he and his colleagues have compiled. Fascinating. And what the basic finding from so many sessions, and this is what a lot of the researchers don't realize is that one session is one thing, but once the subject has more sessions, what happens is that when materials from consecutive LSD sessions of the same person were compared, so they compared the materials, they recorded the materials, they compared them, so when the material was compared, it became evident that there was a definite continuity between the sessions. It just didn't come as random, like this session is this, that session is that, completely random. There was definite continuity between the sessions. And rather than being unrelated and random, the materials seem to represent a successive unfolding of deeper and deeper layers of the unconscious with a definite trend. So this is
one
what...
question. Was Gross the guy who also used the LSD in the euthanasia?
No.
When you help people, accompany them before they die, it's actually been used, LSD, and it's been successfully used because these people, before they died, they took LSD, they felt this wholeness, and they could die in peace.
Okay, maybe you're talking about terminally ill patients.
Yeah.
He has worked with terminally ill. That's not euthanasia. Euthanasia is when you choose to die.
Oh no, sorry, euthanasia. Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah.
I confounded it.
Yeah, he worked with terminally ill patients. Yeah. So I'm just going to quickly, for 5 more minutes, let's keep the questions, and in 5 minutes we'll have question and answers. So I can say 5 minutes about this very interesting part of his research. Basically about the cartography of the psyche that he did with so many cases of work. So he said that he thought, oh my God, we're making new discoveries about the mind. We're making a new research. But then he found out that actually traditional spiritual paths have all had their versions of this, of what he was talking about. So what they were discovering was nothing new in many ways. But what was interesting was that they were looking from a different perspective. So basically, he mapped all these sessions into what he calls the cartography of the mind. This is the cartography of the experience. And he mapped 3 layers, 3 basic big layers. The first layer is the biographical domain. The biographical domain is that when people go through a session, whether it's holotropic breathwork, whether it's LSD induced, or even ayahuasca induced, because I think they've also worked with ayahuasca and psilocybin as well, is that what happens is that people will have recall of materials, traumatic materials from their life. So that means, but it's different from a classical psychotherapy where people talk about it, blah, blah. What happens is that it just comes, and they re-experience it with a very strong emotional intensity. This is the biographical domain. So this is the shortest one to say. It's things from your life. And then very interesting is the perinatal domain. That's the second layer. Perinatal means related to birth. So this is where people experience things that are related to their birth process. And the perinatal domain comes in 4 substages. The first substage is the intrauterine experience, when the fetus is really small and just exists in the womb, and it's almost like an oceanic experience. So people, when they're in this state, they might actually experience like floating in the ocean, like kind of oneness, feeling with everything. And there are also traumas related to this period if the mother was sick at that period, and people might experience like different, like they've been attacked, like this harmonious intrauterine experience might they might be attacked by demons who suddenly kind of try to break into this harmony. So this is the first stage. And it's very healing for people to experience this stage in a psychology therapy. And there is the next stage, which is the onset of the birth process. Each stage has this very interesting archetypal map. The onset of birth stage is when suddenly the contractions start during the birth. What people experience with the start of contractions during the birth is like they're suddenly being sucked into a wormhole, or like they're being suddenly tied up. And he said that this stage is very it can be very scary when people go through this stage. Like they might suddenly feel like they're being tied up by a spider web. They cannot move, or that they're being eaten by a snake, and that they cannot move. This is basically what the fetus experiences when he starts being pushed through the
Birth canal.
birth canal, right? And the emotions related to this is basically feelings that there is no escape, there is nowhere to go, everything is hopeless, everything is there is no solution to this. So he said that when people trigger, because we all have these traumas more or less, so when experiences from this life happen, they might trigger in us different parts of the birth process. And a lot of times depressions are related to this. There is no escape, everything is dark, there is art. Art can also be motivated by each of these stages, like Waiting for Godot, for example. It's a typical story of no escape, nowhere to go. It's very nihilistic state, but basically you move, there is nowhere to go. And then there is the second stage. This is also a very interesting stage with a very rich phenomenology. It's basically when you're right in the middle of the birth canal, right in the middle. And what people experience then is just suffocation, complete pressure on all sides. And very interesting emotions that are related to this are emotions of extreme aggression, sexuality, and everything related to that. So if a person goes through this, like it's very interesting in a psycholytic session or in a holotropic breathwork, if people go through this, they can either experience the actual birth process, or they can experience a lot of archetypes related to this. Blood, orgy, sadistic things. Everything, according to Groff, has the root in this part of the perinatal domain. We're right in the middle of the extreme emotions of aggression, murderous aggression, and it's very interesting, this connection between sexuality and aggression is very classical, typical mark of this stage. So Groff was very good friend with Geiger, the Swiss guy who draw the alien from the movies of Alien, and he has a lot of that kind of art of merging of technology, organic stuff, and things like coming out. And according to Groff, like Geiger's art is a typical representation of this part of the perinatal matrix. And the last stage of perinatal matrix is going through the birth channel, going on the other side, coming on the other side. And this is a very interesting stage because people at this time can experience like explosions, revolutions, like in archetypal way it can come as such, like revelations, salvation. But before that they can experience complete and total failure on all levels, intellectual, spiritual, moral. Like going through this stage, you can experience failure on all levels. And he said this is like the fourth stage is very important to have somebody to guide you through because you're losing all the reference points. All the reference points, and just very soon afterwards of losing all reference points, people can come out on the other side and start perceiving like redemption, have these amazing feelings of golden colors and all this kind of stuff. I will stop here. There is one more domain. It's called transpersonal domain. I'm just going to say transpersonal means going beyond the person. And transpersonal domain